Okay, we're going to start with the learning sponsors, and then we'll pick up Gemara. Okay, a few other people are out today. Okay. A year of learning by Sue and Arnie Gerlich in memory of Malka Perman and Philip Mann. And Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Yosef Meir ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Henya Rivka Pearl Rosner, bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch. And in memory of family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Cheryl Sher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marsha Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edelbas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedal, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan, friends of Avi Gittler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, and Martha Gittler, Charna Bas Yeshaya, friends of Toby Paris, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levy, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim, Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine, in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata bat Asher. Have a month of learning by Dov Bodlander, in memory of his wife Udal bat Yehuda Tzvi, Mordechai and Miriam Burr, in memory of his father, Yaakov ben Mordechai, friends from Yarmouth E, in memory of Miriam and Michael Schiffer's son, Zev David ben Shimon Halevi, David and Mindel Cheslow, in memory of his mother, Bela Bas Meir. And that is it. May the Neshamas have an Aliyah, Crank Rafia, about the Yeshua Shem Atzliah, and the Chol B'nai Israel, a good Gebench Jah.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
Very good. Okay. I'm just looking at the weekly, a reminder that today being the, the 19th? Yesterday was the 19th, actually. 20th. But the reminder that in terms of high holiday seats, okay, that was yesterday was supposed to be the deadline. Okay, all right. Okay, Steve, you're there. You see me? You hear me?
Yes, I am here. I'm on the phone.
Okay, Harvey. All right, not yet. Okay. So we've been discussing aspects of schach, okay? And we saw that the Gemara raised a number of questions as to a variety of kinds of brush, plant growth that may or may not be used, okay? We also saw that there are certain kinds that in theory could be used, like wormwood, for example, but it was suggested that not be used because it had a poor odor, okay? And as we continued on to the top of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, okay, we saw other examples, right, that the odor would force people to leave the sukkah. And then Rav Chanan said another example, Hizmi v'higi, okay? These were brambles or thorn bushes, right? One could use those for schach, right? And once more, Abai made a suggestion that with the brambles, it was okay. With thorn bushes, it was not. Ma'itama kevan denatre trafaihu shavik la v'nafik, because their leaves would fall, okay? And as a result of that, you would not, might cause people to get up and find the sukkah uncomfortable, okay, and leave. Okay, so that's where we ended yesterday. Okay, so we're going to be on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, about 5 lines down from the top of the Amud. Okay? As we continue with this discussion, okay, the thought that want to pick up on the concept, let's come back to that, is the fact is, if it's going to be uncomfortable in the sukkah, does that imply that you are, if it's iksar, right, if it's uncomfortable, and we could say it's not just because of the schach, maybe because of other circumstances, okay? We're not there yet, right? Okay, could that mean that you would be exempt from fulfilling the mitzvah? Okay, but I'm just reminding us that while we're focused on the language of the Gemara and the examples, okay, Koren usually in its introduction to each section or to its conclusion of a section, okay, oftentimes to try to focus in on what is the concept that the Gemara is trying to deal with. Remember initially we said that the initial concept here in this first parak was the fact that we had the requirement in the Torah to dwell in Sukkot, but we had no details defined in the Torah, okay? And therefore that first Mishnah had to give us 3 criteria. Okay? So now we're still exploring. We explored the criteria of height, okay? We explored somewhat the criteria of walls. Now we continue to explore the criteria, the third one of the schach, okay? So I don't want us to sort of lose the conceptual issue as well, okay? So now continue. Amar Rav Gidl Amar Rav. Says Rav Gidl, the name of Rav. Hi Afkuta. Okay. What about, he says, these, let's call them, we could call them palm fronds, we could call them offshoots, okay? The dikla of a palm tree. Misachachin baho, afal gav da agide. That one can use these palm fronds, okay, that are bound together even though they are bound. So why is that the case? We learned. Okay, well, we're going to see in a moment. Okay, agad bidei shamayim lo shame eged. Okay, the fact that they grow that way, okay, and are sort of grouped at the bottom and then spread out, okay. Even since they are, so to speak, bound together by heaven. In other words, that's the way that Hashem created them. Okay, we don't consider that a kind of binding that nullifies its use. Okay, it's not possible, right? Right, so we go on, right? Afagav dahadar agid laho, even though we say that they are bound together. Eged b'chad lo shmei aged. Okay, that if we're having a further example. Okay. Okay, so we're going to get to the point. Yes, it's bound at one end. Okay, but as being bound at one end, the reason for making it pasul, the question is, what if I were to bind it at the other end? That, and ideally, would render it pasul. Okay, because then it would be bound at both ends. Okay, bound at both ends, and it would be what I'm going to call a single unit, which we've seen before. We've already been told that bundles of items, remember we had the straw, we had the twigs, things like that. We were already told that those are not bad. Okay. So what happens? Amar Rav Chisda, now Rav Chisda. Amar Ravina Bar Shila, in the name of Ravina Bar Shila. Hani Dukre we have these stalks, right? Dekane of reeds, misachachin baho. We're able to use them for schach. Afal gav da agide minhu, even though they are bound together. Again, the Gemara tells us, Eged bidei shemayim lo shmei eged, that if they grow together, these kinds of reeds, okay, almost similar to papyrus, okay?
They have a one root ball with.
Okay,
several
and they
stems.
grow out, right? So what happens there? Afal gav da hadar agid laho. Again, even though they are initially bound together in a natural manner, right? Eged bachad lo shmei eged. Again, this kind of binding is not considered the kind of binding that's going to render it possible. Tanya nami hachi, and we have a braita that teaches this as well, namely kanim v'duk ranim. We have reeds and we have kinds of tapered poles. Misachachin bahen. One is able to use them for schach. Kanin pshitas is the Gemara. With regards to the reeds, doesn't that seem obvious? Ema kanin shel dukarin misachachin. No, I would say what we're talking about is reeds that are they themselves are tapered, okay, and therefore one can use them for schach. Va'amar Rav Chisda amar Ravina bar Shila. Furthermore, saying another explanation, Hani mararita, the agma, okay, these bitter kinds of growths. Again, it's another kind of plant, okay, right, that grows in the swamp area. Okay, so it could be another kind of reed, another kind of papyrus. It could be another kind
This
of
is
item.
just a deviation.
Okay,
This
So
is a
what-
Side bench.
okay. So what happens? Adam yotze behen yedei chovato b'Pesach. Okay, what happens is all of a sudden the same, since the Gemara cited, okay, Rav Chisda in the name of Ravina bar Shila, previously they are citing a different topic, but okay, same speakers, right? And they said, no, you have these other kinds of reeds that are bitter. You could use those for something else ritually, namely to satisfy the requirement on Pesach. May tive, and we'll challenge this with a braita. Ezov velo ezov yavan. But wait a second, says the Gemara. This braita tells us if we have hyssop, and remember the hyssop was supposed to be used, okay, and tied together as a bundle, okay? And what was the hyssop used for? Everybody remember? Right, okay. Right, so what happens? So the hyssop, velo ezov yavan, and not Greek hyssop. Velo ezov kochli, and not a kind of blue hyssop. Okay, this was another variety. Velo ezov midbari, and not a kind of hyssop that grows from the desert. Notice these three examples all had adjectives describing them as a particular variety. And so therefore, velo ezov romi, and not Roman hyssop. Velo ezov sheyesh lo shem levai, and not any kind of hyssop that has any kind of adjective describing it. Excuse me. And so these other varieties are not acceptable because they're saying that in this example, you're spelling out clearly this situation, this variety, right? Amar Abai, and Abai here thought to say, Kol shenishtane shmo kodem matan Torah, any example in which the name was changed before the giving of the Torah, right? Ubata Torah vehikpida aleh, and the Torah was stringent in terms of mentioning
One type.
particular variety, okay? Biyadua sheyesh lo shem levan. Okay, if we know that it has an accompanying name, namely a descriptive, another description of it, that's not going to be acceptable. Vahani lo nishtaneh shmaihu kodem matan Torah klal. Okay, and these others, their name was not changed whatsoever before the giving of the Torah whatsoever.
I
Ra-
would assume that color is the thing that's the problem, because all Hasab are made the same,
In other words, there are different varieties of the same plant.
right, so they were specifying only color here.
So it's one variety that they're saying, like these other varieties, are not acceptable.
Right, so
It's
So-
not,
it's still pointed, it's the same.
In other words, it wants a very particular example.
Right.
Okay? If I were to say to you, beans,
All kinds of different-
there are all kinds of beans, right? Okay? So would that mean that it's any kind of bean would be acceptable?
I said, right now,
Okay.
yeah, but then they were specified.
Okay,
the answer was
that's
no.
okay. That's the example, right? So Rava Amar says Rava, Hani Mararita, Stama Shemaihu. No, he says that this bitter item specifically, Stama in general, that's the one,
Shoresh Moror.
right? That it's got to be clearly a variety that is bitter. That's its name. Bahai Dikre Laho Mirarita de Agma. And here they're called the bitter items from the swamp. Mishum de Mishtachach Ba'agma, because they're found in the swamp. In other words, maybe in that particular case, it's not used as a descriptive to describe the hyssop, but simply as a general statement to say, well, where would it be found? So you could argue again. So however, now we're going to come back to our issue of bundles, right? Amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda, Eged bechad lo shmei eged. If it's only bound in one location, okay?
One item
Okay.
bound together.
Hold on a minute, okay? We'll get to it in a second. Okay, if it's bound in one location and it's a single item, okay? Right, it's not called binding, shalosh. But if they have multiple items, okay? And now the question is going to be, if you have a multiple, but you only still bind it in one place, okay? What's the situation? Shmei eged, okay? So now we go on, shnayim. If you have two items, and again, still I have the question in mind, and it's bound in one location. Machloket Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbanan. And here I have a machloket between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbanan. Ditznan, because I have a Mishnah that teaches mitzvat ezov shlosha kilachim. The mitzvah regarding the hyssop is there I need three, let's call it, I want to call it branches, stems, growths, things like that.
Maybe 3 plants.
Or could be 3 plants, right?
Because
All right, ubahen shlosha gav olim, and they have 3 stems. Rav Yossi Omer mitzvat ezov shlosha gav olim. Rabbi Yossi defines it as the mitzvah as of hyssop is where we have 3 stems. Visharav shnayim, okay, and their roots, so to speak, are 2. Vagardumav, and its stumps, okay, kol shahu, are at least somewhat there. Kasal geda'atach, is it possible that we might be saying then, right? Midisharav shnayim, since its roots are 2. Tchilato nami shnayim, but therefore its beginnings, its initial growths are 2. Bahai de katani shlosha the mitzvah, and the fact that it says 3 for the purpose of the mitzvah, right? What is it? Umida Rabbi Yossi shlosha the mitzvah, and since Rabbi Yossi says that there are 3 for the mitzvah, okay. In other words, is this what he is requiring lechatchila? The Rabbanan shlosha la'akev. And maybe the rabbis say, okay, have a different view, right? That their argument is going to be that if you don't have 3, that you can't do it whatsoever, right? Vahatanya, but aren't we taught elsewhere in a bright? Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi, Ezov tchilato shnayim v'shirav echad pasul, that if we have the hyssop, where two of the growths, let's say, are there, that's what we have, and the root is only one, that's invalid. That doesn't work.
If you start with two
And
and
you,
the one falls out,
okay,
it's like bundle, like you have three and you put a rubber band around
Right.
it. But when you get to shul, there's only two in your bundle. One in the left, one in the car. That's what he's talking
all right,
about. Really,
okay, I would have used an example.
really.
Okay, I would have used a slightly different example, okay? Only you're right, but I would have said for when we have the example of the, for Sukkot,
A
And we-
rubber.
Aravas,
Yeah.
okay,
Where you
that,
have to have five, but
okay,
if one's missing, it's not ma'akeh.
right? Okay,
That's what he's talking
Now you're telling me?
okay, so now,
about.
okay.
You can even use one.
Okay, ve'eno kasher ad sheyehi tchilato shlosha v'shirav shnayim. Okay, and it's not valid, he says, unless we have
At least two.
two, okay, and, all right, two of them home, all right, it grows, and then, all right, and the roots are three, right? Epoch, I would reverse this, he says. The Rabbi Yossi shlosha la'akein. For Rabbi Yossi, we say there are three that are going to hold it back from fulfilling it. The Rabbanan shlosha mitzvah. For the rabbis, they said you needed three for the sake of the mitzvah. Bahatanya, but aren't we taught here? Ezov tchilato shnayim v'shirav echad kasher. That with the hyssop, if we have two growths initially and the part and the root of a third, it's valid. Ve'eno pasul ad sheyehi tchilato v'shirav echad. Okay, and it does not become invalid unless we say, right, that we have a situation where you have, okay, one, its initial growth and only one root. Shirav echad pasul, with one of the roots, we say it's going to be pasul. Ha'amar shirav echad kasher. But here we just said with one root, it was invalid, right? Ella ema, but rather I would say as follows. Ad shetehei tchilato k'shirav echad. Okay, until we say that at least one, all right, is stem is valid. Darash Merima. Now Merima, Hani Isuraita. Okay, these bundles,
Going back
Okay.
to stop.
right? So what happens? These bundles, okay? And what kind of bundles are we? We're talking about twigs that come from a particular location. Okay, by the remember yesterday, we talked briefly, Michael pointed out and others about using a mat. And was the mat made specifically kosher because its intent and location and things like that? So here too. Hani usuraita de surah. These bundles of twigs that come from surah, Masachachin baho afal gav da'agdan. One can bundle, one can use them as chach, even though they are bound together. The minyana ba'almahu da'agdan. Okay, why are they bound together? They are simply bound together to fix the numbers. Okay, and those for their sale. That's what they're
Sells a
doing.
dozen
Okay,
bamboo
right, that's it,
poles,
right.
so it-
in other words, the idea is you sell the poles, while they're bound together, you bring it home, you cut the
You
binds,
don't have to.
okay?
In this case, you
Well,
would
we'll
not have
see.
to. because
We'll
they're
see.
Not bound for storage.
Okay,
They're bound
hold
for
on,
stock.
we'll see. Amar Rab Abba Hani Tzrifi, the Orbani. Okay, what about, he said, these knotted willows? Kevan Shehutra Roshem Adanin Shelahem. Since we say that here too, the upper branches, the upper ties, okay, are available, ksherim, that they are valid. Vaha agide metatai, but we say they are bound from below. Amar Rav Papa says, Rav Papa the Shari law. We permit these, right? Now, Let's go on.
Shari, you cut the rope.
Okay, there you go. Okay, now what happens? So we've got two examples. Can you use bound things or not use bound things? Okay. Rav Huna bered the Rav Yoshua. Afilu tema de lo share lo. Even if you say they didn't permit them. Kol eged she'ino asui letaltalo lo shmei eged. So we're saying that any situation where we have the items bound together and their purpose is for carrying, for selling, things like that. Okay, we don't consider that being bound. That would prohibit it from using for the schach. Why are you saying no?
Because if it's bound for the purpose of making it easier to carry, that's called an egg. That would be, I'm putting it into the oath. If it's bound for the purpose of simply enumerating them, they're bound in clusters of 10, and you pay $1 for 10. Or if they're bound to hold them in place, those are.
I don't see that here.
Igud. That's what the Gemara means.
I don't see it here.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And I didn't see it in any of either the
No, well, that's what
commentaries.
it said. I mean, it says if it's
But
bound
I'm
just to
telling you,
hold it in
okay?
place, then
All right.
you can use it.
That's
But if it's bound for
the question-
carrying, you
it-
cannot
clear.
use it.
But you're not giving the.
Kol echad she'ino asui letaltalo lo shmei eged. That's what the Gemara says. That's not considered, if it's used for carrying, she'ino asui letaltalo, right?
If it's
Okay, lo shmei eged, that's not considered binding. Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Shmuel. Let's take another example. Yirakot, she'amru chachamim adam yotzei behen yedei chovato b'Pesach. You have various vegetables that you could use for Pesach. Mevi'ina tat, again, slight discussion elsewhere. Mevi'ina tatuma, okay, and they carry tuma. Ve'ein chotzatzin b'fnei hatuma, and they don't make a break for tuma. Uposlim b'sukami shum avir, okay, and they don't, and they are rendering it invalid because of the question of the air, the use of them for schach. Okay, so the Gemara goes on. My tama, what's the reasoning? Kevan de lechi yavshe parche, because what happens is when they dry, they crumble, v'nafle, and the leaves fall. Kaman delete nehu dami. All right, and so therefore we're saying here too that under these circumstances they are not usable for schach. Va'amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Huna. This is Rabbi, right? Habotzer lagat. Okay, if one is harvesting those items at the wine press, ein lo yadot. They do not have handles. Okay, what does it mean they don't have handles? Okay, it means they're going to be more susceptible to tumor. Okay, less susceptible.
Yeah, if you have the yad, like you have imagine a cherry with the little stem on it. So if tuma touches the little stem, it would make the whole cherry come. If it's called the yad. If it's not called the yad, then tuma can touch it and it would not.
Look at the note. The reason is that with grapes which would not press do not need a handle.
Correct.
And
So
B,
they-
the
Once they're
person
pressed,
prefers.
they don't.
Right, that's when,
if the
it's before
you
that
want
they
the
become
grapes,
handled.
You don't want that little tree-like thing that they're
The
on.
the growth
So it's not a
afterwards.
yad. But if you want to use the yad, like you're sitting and eating grapes while you're
You can't,
eating.
right, you can't use the stems. The point is, you can't use those stems for schach.
Okay.
Okay? Rav Menashe bar Gada Amar Rav Huna, Rav Huna, Hakotzer l'schach ein lo yado. One who cuts these things and harvests for the purpose of schach, they cannot have these growths, these stems, these things like that. Okay? Manda Amar Kotzer Kol Shekain Botzer. The one who says harvesting in this way, certainly when we're talking about harvesting in another way. The lo nechale, the lo nimtsaye lachmare. Okay, why? Because we say that he doesn't want them to be fined, okay, with his wine. Man da amar botzer she'em lo yadot. The one who says that when he's harvesting and it doesn't have these stems, handles, etc. Aval kotzer yesh lo yadot. But when he harvests the other, it does have. The nechale de liskach baho. That it's comfortable for him to use that for skach. Ki hechi de lo liv daran. Why? Because then they won't scatter. Name of the Rab Menashe bar Gada Tanaihi. Shall we say that this example that Rab Menashe is bringing is a machloket Tanaim? Okay, as follows. The Tanya, as we're taught as follows. Suche Ta'anim, the branches of Ta'anim, okay, of the dates, Ubahen Ta'anim, and they have dates still attached to them. Parchilin, Ubahen Anavim, of vines, and they have grapes still attached to them. Kashin, Ubahen Shvalim, okay, or we have another item like palm branches, okay, called brooms in this case, all right, and they still have pieces attached to them. Mechabdot, ubahen tmarim, or other kinds of growth like branches, and they still have dates attached to them. Kulan im psolet miruba al ha'achlim kshera, right? They are in a situation where let's call it the solet, the remains, the growth, okay, things like that, is greater than the amount of foodstuffs, it's valid, right? Ve'im lav, and if not, psula, it is invalid. Acherim omrim, the others say, ad sheyu kashim, until they are hard, merubin al hayadot, va'al ha'alochlim. Okay, you've got to have the more of the solet, okay, than the, let's say, these stems or handles, and more than the foodstuffs. My love bahakim iflage, isn't this what they're arguing about? The mar savar yesh lehen yadot, umar savar en lehen yadot. That one says they have these handles, and the other says they don't have these handles. The Rabbi Abba Vadai Tanaihi. According to Rabbi Abba, clearly this is the machlok. The Rab Menashe Bar Gada Milema Tanaihi. Should we say that according to Rab Menashe, this is what this machloket Tanaim is? Amalach Rab Menashe. The Kuli Alma Savre Hakotzer L'Schach Aim Lo Yado. That according to Rab Menashe, everybody is in agreement that they hold the opinion that when you harvest these items for the purpose of schach, they cannot have these handles, these stems on them. Bahacha b'mayas kinan, and what are we talking about here? Kagon shekotzatzin la'achila. For example, let's say that he harvests these items for the purpose initially of eating, okay, and not necessarily for the purpose of schach. V'nimlach alayhu v'sichuch, right? And then afterwards he changed his mind, and then is going to use them for schach. Ikotzatzin la'achila, if he harvested them for eating, mai ta'amayhu d'Rabbanan, then what's the reasoning of the rabbis, right? V'chitema kesavre Rabbanan, and here, if you want to say that the rabbis were of the following opinion, Kevan denimlach alayhin l'sichuch, since he changed his mind and decided that they were for schach, but la le machshavto, are we going to say that his intent then was nullified? Umi bat la le machshava bahachi, and is it possible that he could have nullified his thinking for these purposes? Vahatnan, and aren't we taught elsewhere in the Mishnah, kol hakelim yurdim lidei tum'ah b'machshava, okay, that, aren't we taught here? Okay, that we're saying that these items become susceptible, okay, to tuma through thought. Ve'ein olim mitumatan ela b'shinui ma'aseh. And there is no way to remove them from that potential, okay, of being susceptible to tuma unless it's through an action, right? And then we see the Gemara is going to continue. Ma'aseh motzi miyad ma'aseh umiyad machshava. Okay, that an action removes them both from an active,
Previous act.
right, an earlier act that could render them tuma, okay, or from an earlier thought. Machshava eina motzia lo miyad ma'aseh lo miyad machshava. But thought does not render it either from a previous act of tumah or a previous thought. And we'll stop right there,
Machshava lo k'maisa.
right? Okay,
No, it affects it one way.
Thank you, Reb.
okay.